I took in my homeless sister to save her life. 3 months later, she kicked my 2-year-old son out of his own room, accused me of child abuse, and I lost everything. My name is Rebecca, and I am speaking to you from the empty living room of the dream house I sacrificed 10 years to buy. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, but my younger sister Mona turned it into a war zone. I thought I was rescuing a victim of domestic violence when she showed up at my door in the rain. I was wrong. I invited a predator into my home who seduced my husband with lies, stole my financial security, and weaponized the law to hold my family hostage. I watched helplessly as she turned my husband against me and terrified my little boy, all while I paid her bills. How much poison are you willing to swallow just to be called a good sister? At what point does trying to help someone destroy your own existence? I finally fought back, but the collateral damage was my marriage. Please, I need someone to tell me. Was I wrong to finally become the monster she painted me to be to save my son? My name is Rebecca Miller. I am 38 years old, and for the last 15 years, I have spent my days staring into the gaping mouths of strangers, scraping away their decay. As a registered dental hygienist, it is a job that requires precision, a strong stomach, and the ability to make polite conversation with people who cannot talk back. I have become an expert at reading eyes, the panic, the pain, the deception. You learn a lot about a person by how they care for the things no one else sees. But apparently, I was blind to the rot spreading under my own roof. I live in a 4-bedroom colonial in a subdivision called Whispering Pines, just 40 minutes outside of Chicago. My husband, David, an actuary who treats risk assessment like a religion, and I spent a decade eating store-brand pasta and skipping vacations to afford the down payment. We have a 2-year-old son named Leo, whose laughter is the only sound that truly fills the vaulted ceilings of our living room. We moved in 6 months ago. It was supposed to be our sanctuary, the manicured lawn, the homeowners association with their strict rules about fence heights, the double-car garage. It was the picture of the American dream packaged in beige siding. I remember standing in the kitchen that Tuesday night, running my hand over the cool quartz countertop. It was a tactile reminder that I had made it. I was the good sister, the responsible one, the one who got out of the trailer park and made something of herself. The rain was hammering against the double-paned windows, a relentless rhythm that usually made me feel cozy. David was upstairs putting Leo to bed, and the baby monitor sat on the island, emitting a soft, static hum. It was 9 in the evening. The house was settling, groaning softly against the wind. It was perfect, and then the doorbell rang. It was not a polite ring. It was a frantic, sustained press that sent a jolt of adrenaline straight to my stomach. Who comes to a stranger's door in a storm like this? I moved to the foyer, my socks sliding slightly on the hardwood. We were so terrified of scratching. I flipped the porch light on and peered through the peephole. The figure outside was huddled, shaking, unrecognizable through the distortion of the rain and the glass. I unlocked the deadbolt and cracked the door. A gust of wind threw water into my face, and there she was, saluting, howling. Doi, Mona. My younger sister looked like a drowned rat. That was the first thought that crossed my mind. Corel. Instant. And unbidden. She was 34, but in the harsh porch light, she looked like a teenager who had run away from home. Her mascara was running in black rivers down her cheeks, and she was clutching a garbage bag to her chest as if it contained the crown jewels. Becca, she choked out. her teeth chattering audibly. Please, I did not even think. The conditioning of a lifetime took over. I was the fixer. She was the broken thing. I pulled the door wide open and ushered her inside, the water from her cheap coat immediately pooling on my pristine floor. David came down the stairs a moment later, his footsteps heavy. He stopped halfway down, his hand gripping the banister. I saw his face harden. He did not see a sister in need. He saw a liability. He saw chaos entering our controlled environment. What is going on? David asked, his voice low, devoid of warmth. Mona collapsed onto the entryway bench. Sobbing, she pulled back the hood of her sweatshirt, revealing a dark, purplish bruise blooming along her jawline. It was ugly. It looked fresh. Gary, she gasped, saying the name of her boyfriend like it was a curse word. He, Xiao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than he lost it. Becca, he came home drunk again. I did not have the money for the rent because I bought groceries. And he just, Xiao Yu Jinghao Ling, 2 hash is greater than he snapped. I felt a surge of nausea. I knelt beside her, my hands hovering over her trembling shoulders. I looked at the bruise with my clinical eye. I wanted to assess the trauma, to check for swelling, but my sisterly instinct overrode my training. I wrapped my arms around her. She smelled of rain, stale, cigarettes, and something else, something sharp and metallic, like fear. I had to get out. Mona sobbed into my shoulder. He threw me out. I have nowhere to go. I just got on a bus and came here. You are the only one who has ever cared about me. I looked up at David. He was standing at the bottom of the stairs now, arms crossed over his chest. His eyes flickered from Mona's bruise to the puddle on the floor. He was not buying it. Or perhaps he just did not want to buy it. David was a man of logic, and Mona was pure entropy. But he saw the bruise. He saw the desperation. He let out a long, slow breath through his nose, a sign that he was surrendering against his better judgment. Get her a towel, Rebecca, he said quietly, and some dry clothes. I spent the next hour fluttering around her like a moth. I made her chamomile tea. I found an old pair of sweatpants and a hoodie. I set up the pull-out sofa in the living room with our guest linens, the high thread count sheets I usually saved for David's parents. Mona sat on the edge of the sofa, the mug of tea clasped in both hands. The trembling had stopped. She looked small in the large room, surrounded by our tastefully curated furniture and the abstract art we had bought at a gallery downtown. Thank you, she whispered, her voice raspy. I don't know what I would do without you. You always win. Becca, you always have the answers. I am just glad you are safe, I said, sitting in the armchair opposite her. You can stay here tonight. We will figure something out in the morning. I felt a warm glow in my chest. This was who I was. I was the benevolent, older sister, the protector. I had the resources to help. I was validating my own success by dispensing charity to my own flesh and blood. It was a sick kind of satisfaction, one I would never admit to out loud. David had already gone up to bed, refusing to engage further. I stood up to turn off the lights, get some sleep. Mona, I said softly. Wait, she said. I turned back. Mona was looking around the room. Her eyes were dry now. She was not looking at me. She was looking at the 60-inch OLED television mounted above the fireplace. Her gaze slid to the heavy velvet curtains, then down to the Persian rug beneath her feet. It was not a look of gratitude. It was not the look of someone who had just escaped a violent assault. It was an appraisal. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she scanned the crown molding, calculating the value, measuring the square footage against her own failures. For a split second, the mask of the victim slipped, and I saw something ancient and reptilian in her expression. It was a hunger so profound, it made the hair on my arms stand up. "You have a really nice life, Becca," she said. Her tone was flat, lacking the emotional tremor from before. "I worked hard for it," I said, a sudden defensive instinct flaring up in my gut. Mona smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "Yeah," she said softly. "You sure did." I turned off the lamp, plunging the room into shadows. "Good night, Mona. Good night, big sister." I walked up the stairs, my heart pounding a strange, irregular rhythm. I told myself I was just shaken by her arrival, by the violence she had described. I told myself I was being paranoid. I crawled into bed beside David, who was breathing deeply but not sleeping. "She stays a few days," David whispered in the dark, his back to me. "A week, tops. Then she goes to a shelter or back to Gary. I do not care which. She is family." "David," I whispered back, the guilt already gnawing at my resolve. "She has nowhere else." That was the first lie I told myself that night. The second was that I could control the situation. Downstairs, in the silence of my beautiful, expensive living room, my sister was awake. I could feel it. She was lying on my sofa, in my house, plotting how to take the things I loved and twist them until they snapped. The storm outside was nothing compared to what I had just invited through the front door. 7 days. That is exactly how long it took for the novelty of my altruism to wear off, and for the reality of the intrusion to set in. The atmosphere in the house had shifted, thickening like milk left out on the counter. My sanctuary, once defined by the scent of lavender plugins and the quiet hum of the refrigerator, now smelled faintly of stale cigarette smoke and cheap vanilla body spray, even though David had explicitly forbidden smoking inside. The odor clung to Mona like a second skin. It seeped into the upholstery of the sofa, the throw pillows, and the very air I breathed. I came downstairs on Tuesday morning, fully dressed in my scrubs, ready to face a day of plaque and gingivitis. The living room looked like a campsite. The coffee table, usually adorned with a singular, tasteful, succulent, was littered with empty soda cans, crinkled potato chip bags, and a towering stack of fashion magazines she must have dug out of the recycling bin. Mona was still asleep on the sofa, buried under a mountain of blankets. One bare foot stuck out, the toenails painted a chipped, electric blue. I moved quietly to the kitchen to start the coffee, trying not to wake her. My movements were restricted. As sedent, I was tiptoeing in my own home, afraid to disturb the guest who was currently costing me my peace of mind. David entered the kitchen a moment later, adjusting his tie. His eyes were red-rimmed. Neither of us had slept well. The tension in the house was a physical weight pressing down on our chest. "Is she still asleep?" David whispered, jerking his head toward the living room. I nodded as I poured the dark roast into 2 mugs. "She had a rough night," I said. My voice hushed. She was tossing and turning a lot. David took the mug, his fingers brushing against mine. His skin felt hot. "She was watching television until 3 in the morning. Rebecca," I could hear the bass vibrating through the floorboards. "I have a presentation today. This cannot go on." I felt that familiar pinch of guilt, the one that sat right between my shoulder blades. I knew he was right. I knew I should be angry. But when I looked at the lump on the sofa, all I saw was the little girl who used to hide behind my legs when our parents started screaming at each other. I will talk to her, I promised. Looking down at my coffee, I will tell her to keep it down tonight. David drank his coffee in 3 large gulps, grabbed his briefcase, and left without kissing me goodbye. The front door clicked shut, the sound echoing with finality. A groan came from the living room. I walked over. Mona was sitting up, clutching her lower back with both hands. Her hair was a bird's nest of tangles, and her face was pinched in an expression of exaggerated agony. "Good morning," I said, forcing a brightness into my tone that I did not feel. "Coffee?" Mona winced as she shifted her weight. "I do not think I can walk to the kitchen," she rasped. "God, Becca, this sofa, it is like sleeping on a pile of bricks. My spine feels like it is going to snap in half." I felt a flash of irritation. That sofa had cost us $2,000. It was Italian leather. It was not a pile of bricks. "I am sorry," I said, keeping my face neutral. "It is a pull-out. They are never as comfortable as a real bed." Mona looked up at me, her eyes wide and watery. "I cannot go to that job interview today," she said. "I can barely stand up straight. Look at me. I look like a cripple. How am I supposed to serve tables or answer phones when I'm in this much pain?" "But you promised," I thought. "You said you would start looking immediately." "Instead," I said, "do you want some ibuprofen?" She sighed, a long, suffering sound that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the room. "Pills will not fix a slipped disc. Becca, I need rest, real rest, not Sao Ting Hao Ling. 2# is greater than this." Just then, the baby monitor on the kitchen island crackled to life. Leo was awake. He let out a high-pitched squeal of delight, babbling to his stuffed bear. It was a happy sound, the sound of a healthy 2-year-old greeting the morning. Mona flinched as if she had been slapped. She pressed her palms against her temples. "Does he have to be so loud?" she moaned. "It is like a drill going right into my brain. Every morning at 6:30, it is torture." My protective instinct flared. Leo was a toddler. Toddlers made noise. But the look on Mona's face, so fragile, so pathetic, made me swallow my defense. "I will go get him," I said quickly. "I will keep him in the kitchen so you can sleep a little longer." I spent the next 12 hours managing the emotional climate of my household like a hostage negotiator. I kept Leo quiet with an iPad, something I swore I would never do. I cooked a soft dinner that would not require much chewing because Mona claimed her jaw was sore from stress. I was exhausted. Dinner was the breaking point. We sat at the dining table. Me, David, and Mona. Leo was in his high chair, mashing peas with a plastic spoon. The silence was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mona picked at her mashed potatoes. Her posture slumped. David cleared his throat. "So, Mona?" he said, his voice tight. "Any luck with the job search online? Since you could not make the interview." Mona dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the ceramic plate. She looked at David, then at me, her lower lip trembling. "I tried, David. I really did. But it is hard to focus when you are in constant physical pain." And the living room, Soyuting Haoling, 2# is greater than there is no privacy. People walking through, the noise from the kitchen, the draft from the front door. It is impossible to recover. She took a deep breath, and I saw the shift in her eyes. She was about to play a card. Actually, I was thinking, she said, her voice dropping to a reasonable, helpful octave. Leo is still so little. He does not really need that whole room to himself. Does he? He barely sleeps in there half the time anyway. I froze. I saw David's hand tighten around his water glass. What are you suggesting? David asked. Mona shrugged, as if the answer were obvious. Well, why do we not just move his crib into your room? Just for a little while. Or put him in the guest corner of the basement. Then I could take his room, just until I get back on my feet. I need a door. Guys, I need to shut out the world so I can heal. If I heal, I can work. If I work, I can move out. It is logical. The audacity of it took my breath away. She wanted to displace my son. She wanted the nursery I had spent months painting. The room with the custom mural of the solar system. The room that was the heart of this home for me. No, David said. The word was sharp, immediate. Come on, David, Mona pleaded, turning her gaze to me. Help me out here. Becca, you said you wanted to help me. Is a room too much to ask? I am family. Would you treat a stranger better than your own sister? She was looking at me with those big, soulful eyes. The same eyes that had looked at me over a scraping knee on the playground 30 years ago. You are the big sister. You have to share. You have to take care of her. My mother's voice echoed in my head. A ghost I could not exorcise. I looked at David. He was waiting for me to draw the line. He was waiting for me to say, absolutely not. This is my son's room. But I looked at Mona, shivering in her oversized hoodie, looking so small and defeated, and the guilt, that black tar in my veins, rose up and choked me. Maybe, so Yuting Haoling, 2 hashes greater than I started. My voice trembling. Maybe we can discuss it, David, just for a few weeks, until she feels better. Leo is still in a crib. He might sleep better with us anyway. David looked at me as if I had just stabbed him. The betrayal on his face was absolute. He did not yell. He did not slam the table. He simply stood up, picked up his plate, and walked to the kitchen. The sound of the rest of his dinner being scraped into the trash can was the loudest sound in the world. Mona reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Her skin was dry and cool. Thank you. Becca, she whispered. I knew you would understand. You are the only one who really loves me. I looked down at her hand covering mine. I felt sick. I felt like I had just sold a piece of my soul to buy a moment of peace. But as I looked at her triumphant, teary smile, I realized something terrifying. She did not just want the room. She wanted to see if I would give it to her. It was a test, and I had just failed my husband to pass it. Upstairs, a door slammed shut. It was the door to our bedroom. For the first time in 10 years, I knew the lock had been turned from the inside. The sound of the suction tube gurgling in a patient's mouth usually drove me crazy by 2 in the afternoon. It was a wet, hollow noise, a constant reminder of the bodily fluids I spent my life managing. But today, the clinical hum of the dental office felt like a lullaby. It was safe here. Here, problems were visible. A cavity was a hole you filled. Gingivitis was inflammation you treated. There was a protocol for everything. I dreaded the clock on the wall. The second hand swept past the 12, inching me closer to 5 o'clock, closer to home. I had left David and Mona in a ceasefire that morning. David had left for work before the sun came up, avoiding the kitchen entirely. Mona had been asleep, or pretending to be, buried under the duvet on the sofa. I had spent the day distracted, nearly nicking a patient's gum line twice because my mind was replaying the conversation from dinner. Why do we not just move his crib? The audacity of it sat heavy in my stomach, like a stone I had swallowed. I decided to leave work early. My last patient, a teenager with braces, canceled last minute. I told the receptionist I had a migraine. It was not entirely a lie. The pressure behind my eyes had been building since Mona arrived in the rain. I pulled into the driveway at 3:30. The sky was overcast, a flat sheet of gray slate that made the neighborhood look washed out. David's car was not there. He would not be home until 6. It was just me and her. I walked up the front steps, my keys jingling in my hand. I paused at the door. I could hear music. It was not the thrashing bass from the other night. It was something soft, acoustic, the kind of playlist I used to listen to when I was pregnant with Leo to keep my blood pressure down. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The living room was empty. The sofa was folded back up. The blankets were gone. The pillows were fluffed and arranged perfectly. For a split second, relief washed over me. Had she left? Had she realized she was overstepping and decided to go back to Gary? Or maybe to a shelter? Mona? I called out. Silence answered me. I walked through the kitchen. Empty. The sink was clear of dishes. The counters were wiped down. It was eerie. It was too clean. It felt like the calm before a tornado touches down. Then I looked up the stairs. A strange shape was looming at the top of the landing. From the bottom step, it looked like a pile of laundry. I frowned. Gripping the banister, I climbed the stairs slowly. With every step, the pile grew clearer, and the air in my lungs grew thinner. It was not laundry. It was my son's life. Stacked haphazardly in the hallway were Leo's belongings. His changing table was shoved against the wall, scratching the paint. Garbage bags stuffed with his clothes were piled like refuse. His basket of toys, the soft blocks, the plush giraffe, the rattle he loved, had been kicked over, spilling across the carpet, and his crib. My heart hammered against my ribs. The crib was disassembled. The wooden slats were leaned against the railing, precarious and dangerous. The mattress was propped up next to the linen closet. My vision blurred. A hot, prickly heat spread across my scalp. This was not just a mess. This was an eviction. I marched to the door of the nursery. Leo's room. The door was closed. A piece of paper was taped to the wood with blue painter's tape. On it, written in Sharpie, was a single word: recovering. I did not knock. I threw the door open. The smell hit me first. It was the cloying scent of vanilla incense, heavy and thick, masking the faint smell of cigarettes. The room had been transformed. The mural of the solar system, which David and I had spent 3 weekends painting, was half covered by a tapestry pinned to the wall. A cheap, tie-dye thing that looked like it belonged in a college dorm room. And in the center of the room, where the crib used to be, was the mattress from the guest room in the basement. It was on the floor, made up with my sheets. Mona was lying there. She was wearing my silk bathrobe, the expensive one David had bought me for our 5th anniversary. She had a face mask on, a green clay paste that was cracking as she smiled. She was flipping through a magazine, a glass of water on the floor beside her. She looked up, unbothered. "Oh, hey," she said, muffled by the mask. "You are home early." I could not speak. My mouth opened and closed. I looked at the displaced furniture, the tapestry covering the hand-painted Saturn, the woman wearing my clothes in my son's room. "What?" "Sao yu ting hao, Ling." 2 hashes greater than I choked out. "What have you done?" Mona sat up slowly, wincing as if in great pain. She peeled the mask off her chin. I told you. Becca, the sofa was killing me. I tried to nap this morning and my leg went numb. I could not feel my toes. I panicked. She swung her legs over the edge of the mattress. I did not want to bother you at work, she continued, her voice gaining that slippery, reasonable cadence. So I just saw you Jing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than rearranged a little, just to see if it would help. And oh my God, Becca, the difference is night and day. The energy in here is so much calmer. I actually slept for 2 hours. You took apart the crib. I whispered. You threw my son into the hallway. Mona's face fell. She looked at me with wide, wounded eyes. I did not throw him anywhere. He is at daycare. Is he not? He is not even using the room right now. And like we talked about, he can sleep in his playpen in your room tonight. It is just for a few nights. Becca, until my back spasms stop. We did not talk about this, I yelled. My voice cracked, loud and foreign in the quiet house. I said we would discuss it. I did not say yes. Mona flinched, shrinking back against the wall. Tears welled up in her eyes instantly. It was a performance I had seen 1,000 times, but it still worked. It still made me feel like a bully. Why are you screaming at me? She sobbed. I am in pain. I have nowhere to go. I just escaped a man who beat me. And now my own sister is screaming at me over a room? Over 4 walls? She gestured around the room, her hand trembling. You have everything. Becca, you have this huge house. You have a husband. You have money. I have a trash bag of clothes and a bad back. And you are begrudging me a place to heal? I stood there, shaking. The logic was twisted, warped, but she delivered it with such conviction that I felt the ground shifting under my feet. Am I being selfish? The thought crept in, insidious and quiet. It is just a room. Leo is 2. He does not know the difference. She is my sister. But then I looked at the hallway again. I saw the dismantled crib. It was not about the room. It was about the lack of respect. It was the entitlement she had not asked. She had taken. You have to put it back, I said, though my voice lacked the fire it had moments ago. David is going to come home, and he is going to flip out. You cannot stay in here. Mona wiped her eyes with the sleeve of my silk robe. I cannot move it back, she whimpered. My back is locked up. If I try to lift that crib, I will end up in the hospital. Is that what you want? Do you want to pay for an ambulance? I stared at her. She had checkmated me. She knew I could not physically move the furniture back alone before David got home. She knew I would not force her to move if she claimed injury. I put my hands to my head. The migraine I had lied about was now very real. Mona stood up, moving stiffly. She walked over to me and placed her hands on my shoulders. Please, Becca, just for a week, let me heal. I will stay out of your way. I will keep the door closed. David does not even have to see me. Just tell him, Saoyi Jing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than tell him it was your idea. Tell him you wanted to try co-sleeping with Leo because he has been having nightmares. I looked at her. Her eyes were pleading, but behind the tears, there was a steeliness. She was offering me a way out. A lie to tell my husband to keep the peace. If you tell him I did it, she whispered, he will kick me out. You know he will. And then I will be on the street. Is that what you want? Do you want my blood on your hands if Gary finds me? The manipulation was a masterclass. She held her life hostage and placed the gun in my hand. I looked at the hallway. I looked at the ruins of my son's sanctuary. Get back in bed, I said, my voice hollow. Mona smiled. It was a small, victorious twitch of her lips. Thank you, Becca. You are a saint. I turned and walked out of the room, closing the door behind me. I stood in the hallway, surrounded by the debris of my boundaries. I had 2 hours before David came home. I spent the next hour and a half sweating, dragging the heavy pieces of the crib into our master bedroom. I set up the playpen in the corner. I shoved the bags of clothes into the back of our closet. I hid the evidence of the invasion. When David walked through the door at 6:15, the house was quiet again. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables with a force that was unnecessary. Hey, he said, loosening his tie. He looked tired. He walked over and kissed my cheek. Where is the dragon lady? She is upstairs, I said, keeping my eyes on the carrots. She is resting. David paused. He looked around. It is quiet. That is a nice change. I put the knife down. My hands were trembling. David, I said. I was thinking, Saoyutsing Hauling. 2 hash is greater than about what Mona said yesterday. About Leo. David stiffened. Rebecca. No, I think we should try it, I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Just for a week. Leo has been waking up a lot lately. Maybe having him in our room will help him settle. And Saoyutsing Haoling, 2 hash is greater than, and it would give Mona a place to just stay out of our hair. If she has the room, she will stay in there. We will not have to see her. David looked at me. He studied my face, searching for the truth. I held his gaze, willing myself not to blink. I was protecting him. I told myself I was saving him from a fight he did not need to have after a 12-hour workday. I was keeping the peace. Isihil. A long, defeated exhale. He rubbed his eyes. You are too good. Becca, that is your problem. You let people walk all over you. I forced a smile. It is just for a week. David, I promise. He nodded slowly. Fine, 1 week. But if she is not out of that room by next Friday, I am dragging her out myself. He walked past me to go upstairs to change. I stood in the kitchen, listening to his footsteps. I waited for the explosion. I waited for him to see the scratches on the wall or the tapestry over the mural. But silence followed. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. I had bought us time. But as I stood there in the dark, I realized I had done something far worse than moving a crib. I had chosen her over him. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice that sounded suspiciously like Mona's whispered, I knew you would. I opened my eyes. The reflection in the darkened window stared back at me. I looked at my mother, weak, tired, and completely, utterly trapped. I went back to chopping the carrots. The sharp thud, thud, thud of the knife against the wood sounded like a countdown. 1 week. I had 1 week to fix a lifetime of damage. But deep down, I knew the damage had already been done. The virus was in the system, and it was spreading. The erosion of my life did not happen all at once like a landslide. It happened in grains of sand, one small boundary crossed at a time, until I looked down and realized I was standing on nothing. It had been 3 weeks since Mona arrived. The temporary arrangement had calcified into a permanent purgatory. The 1-week deadline for the nursery had come and gone, washed away by a convenient flare-up of Mona's sciatica and my own inability to enforce an eviction notice on a weeping woman. I stood in my master bathroom, staring at the jar of face cream on the marble vanity. It was a jar of La Mer, a ridiculous extravagance I had bought for myself as a reward for my promotion last year. It cost $300. I used it sparingly, a tiny dab every other night, savoring the ritual. The jar was empty. It had been half full 2 days ago. I stared at the white porcelain bottom of the jar, feeling a heat rise up my neck that had nothing to do with the steam from the shower. It was not about the cream. It was about the violation. It was about the fact that nothing was mine anymore. My house, my food, my son's room, and now, the very skin on my face. I walked downstairs, the empty, heavy glass jar clutched in my hand like a weapon. Mona was in the kitchen. She was standing at the stove, stirring a pot of chili. The smell of cumin and onions was overpowering. She was wearing my charcoal cashmere sweater, the one I saved for Christmas parties. It hung loosely on her frame. The sleeves rolled up past her wrists. "You used it all," I said, my voice shaking slightly. Mona turned around, a wooden spoon in her hand. She looked surprised. "Innocent. Used what?" she asked. "The cream," I said, slamming the jar onto the island. $300 of cream. "Mona, you scooped it out like it was cheap lotion." Mona's face crumbled. It was instant, a reflex action she had perfected in childhood. My skin was so dry. "Becca," she whined, shrinking back against the stove. "The heater in this house dries me out. I just used a little bit. I did not know it was gold dust. Why do you have to be so materialistic? It is just face cream." "You are wearing my sweater," I said, ignoring her deflection. "I was cold," she cried out. "All my clothes are in trash bags in the closet. They smell like mildew. I just wanted to feel clean for once. I wanted to look nice for David." The name stopped me cold. "For David?" I asked. Mona bit her lip, looking down. "I just wanted to make a nice dinner," she mumbled, "to say thank you. I made his favorite chili, the one Mom used to make." I felt a cold prickle of unease. How did she know David's favorite chili? David hated spicy food. Unless Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling or Jing Hao Dayu. The front door opened. David walked in. The air in the room shifted instantly. Usually, he would greet me with a kiss, a touch on the arm. Today, he did not even look at me. He walked straight to the refrigerator, took out a beer, and cracked it open. The sound was sharp, like a bone snapping. "Dinner smells good," he said, addressing the room but looking at Mona. Mona beamed, adjusting the collar of my cashmere sweater. "It is Mom's recipe," she said softly. "I remembered you said you liked it spicy that one time at Thanksgiving." David took a long swig of beer. Finally, he turned his eyes to me. They were cold and flat and filled with a suspicion I had never seen before. "We need to talk, Rebecca," he said, in the study. Now, my stomach dropped. I looked at Mona. She was busy stirring the pot, humming a low tune, seemingly oblivious to the execution she had just orchestrated. I followed David into his study. He closed the door and locked it. He walked behind his desk and pulled out a file folder. He did not sit down. "I got a call from our financial advisor today," he said. "I was checking on the college fund for Leo." I nodded, confused. "So you Ting Haling, too, okay?" David looked at me, his jaw working. "Mona and I had a long talk this morning. Rebecca, before you went to work, she was crying. She told me why she is really in such a bad spot." I felt the blood drain from my face. What had she told him? "She told me about the inheritance." David said, "Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling. 2 hashes greater than I frowned." "What inheritance?" "Mom and Dad died with nothing." "David, you know that." We paid for the funeral. David slammed his hand on the desk. The sound made me jump. Do not lie to me, he shouted. He never shouted. Do not stand there and lie to my face. Mona told me about the bonds. The $40,000 in savings bonds Mom kept in the safety deposit box. The ones she left for both of you. I stared at him, my mouth agape, the world tilted on its axis. David, that is insane. There were no bonds. Mom had $600 in her checking account and a mountain of credit card debt. I showed you the paperwork. Did you? David sneered. Or did you show me what you wanted me to see? Mona said, you handled the estate executor duties alone. She said you told her there was nothing. But then, 3 months later, suddenly we have the down payment for this house. I gasped. The accusation was so monstrous, so calculated. It took the air from my lungs. We saved that money, I screamed, tears springing to my eyes. We ate ramen for 5 years. I worked double shifts. How can you believe her over me? She is a liar. David, she is a user. David looked at me with disgust. She is your sister, Rebecca. Why would she lie about something like that? She is sleeping on a mattress on the floor while you walk around with $300 face cream and cashmere sweaters. She has nothing. You have everything. And the math, 小于井号零, 2 hash is greater than the math adds up. Rebecca, $40,000. That is exactly what we put down. It was a masterstroke. Mona had taken my hard work, my sacrifice, and twisted it into evidence of theft. She had weaponized my success against me. I did not steal anything. I whispered, my voice breaking. She is making it up. She is trying to turn you against me. David walked around the desk. He stood close to me, but he did not touch me. I do not know what to believe anymore. He said quietly, I look at you, and I do not see the woman I married. I see someone who kicks her sister when she is down. Someone who hides things, like the crib. 小于井号零. 2 hash is greater than he knew. Mona told me about the crib. 2. He said, she said you forced her to move into the nursery because you did not want her in the living room messing up your aesthetic. She said she begged you to let her stay on the sofa. My legs gave out. I sank into the leather chair behind me. The gaslighting was total. She had rewritten reality. And because I had lied to protect the peace, I had no credibility left to defend the truth. I tried to tell you. I sobbed. I tried to protect you. Protect me? David laughed. A harsh, bark-like sound. You have been lying to me for weeks. I am sleeping in the guest room tonight. Do not follow me. He walked out of the study. I sat there for a long time in the darkening room. Through the closed door, I could hear the clink of silverware on china. I could hear Mona's voice, soft and solicitous, asking David if the chili was spicy enough. I could hear my husband answering her, his voice low and intimate, devoid of the anger he had just unleashed on me. I stood up and walked to the door. I cracked it open just an inch. Through the gap, I saw them at the dining table. Mona was leaning forward, her hand resting on David's forearm in a gesture of comfort. She was wearing my sweater. She was sitting in my chair. She was feeding my husband the lies he was starving to hear. And for the first time, I realized that Mona did not just want a place to stay. She did not just want money. She wanted my life, and she was halfway to getting it. I closed the door silently and slid down to the floor. I wrapped my arms around my knees, rocking back and forth. I was a stranger in my own home. The walls I had paid for were closing in. You let this happen. A voice inside me whispered, you opened the door, But the other voice, the one that had been dormant for years, the voice of the survivor who had dragged herself out of poverty, finally spoke up. It was quiet, cold, and sharp. If she wants a war, it said, she is going to get one. But first, I had to survive the night, and looking at the empty jar of cream in my hand, I realized that survival was going to cost me a lot more than money. It was going to cost me my humanity. The silence in the house was no longer peaceful. It was predatory. For the past 3 days, David had slept in the guest room in the basement. He spoke to me only in monosyllables, his eyes sliding off me as if I were made of glass. Mona, conversely, was blossoming. She moved through the house with a terrifying fluidity, humming softly as she rearranged the spice rack, folded David's laundry, and played with Leo in the backyard, laughing loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. It was Friday, the deadline. David had said, if she is not out of that room by next Friday, I am dragging her out myself. But that was before the lie about the inheritance. That was before he started looking at me like a thief. Now, the deadline felt like a trapdoor waiting to open under my feet. I came home from work early again, driven by a gnawing anxiety that had become my constant companion. I found David's car in the driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. He was home early too. I walked into the house. The atmosphere was brittle, charged with static. David and Mona were in the living room. David was standing by the fireplace, his arms crossed, his face a mask of exhaustion. Mona was sitting on the sofa, my sofa, looking tragic and small, clutching a tissue. Rebecca, David said as I entered. We were just talking about the living situation. I put my purse down on the entry table, my hands trembling. And? I asked, my voice tight. It is Friday, David, you said. I know what I said. David cut in, his voice weary. But Mona has raised some valid points. She has nowhere to go. Rebecca, the shelters are full. She has no money. And frankly, with the Saüting howling, deux dièse est supérieur à question. Saüting howling. 2 hash is greater than regarding the estate. I do not think it is right to kick her out onto the street. Not until we clear this up. I stared at him. The betrayal was a physical blow. He was siding with her. He was keeping the parasite and rejecting the host. So she stays? I asked, my voice rising. She stays in Leo's room? Indefinitely? While I sleep on the couch in my own marriage? Mona looked up, her eyes wide and wet. I offered to leave. Becca, she whimpered. I told David I would go sleep under a bridge if it would stop you guys from fighting. But he is a good man. He would not let a dog sleep outside in this weather. Stop it, I screamed. The sound tore through the room. Leo, who must have been napping upstairs, started crying. Stop acting like a victim. Mona, I yelled, pointing a shaking finger at her. You are not helpless. You are a leech. You lied about the money. You lied about Gary. You are stealing my life. David stepped forward, his face darkening. That is enough. Rebecca, no, it is not enough. I turned on him, all the repressed anger of the last month exploding. You want to know the truth, David? The truth is that you are weak. You are letting her manipulate you because you like playing the savior. You like being the hero to her damsel in distress because I am too independent for you. David flinched. I had hit a nerve. Get out, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Excuse me? I laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound. This is my house. My name is on the deed. Mona stood up then. The tears vanished instantly. She smoothed down her shirt, my shirt, and looked at me with a chilling calmness. Actually, Becca, she said, her voice steady and clear. It is technically my residence too. I froze. So using howling. 2 hash is greater than what? Mona walked over to the coffee table and picked up a piece of paper. It was a mail envelope. I have been receiving mail here for 3 weeks, she said. My bank statements, my unemployment application, and since I have been here for more than 14 days with your verbal permission, and I have contributed to the household, Saoyu Jinghaoling, or Jinghao Dayu, contributed? I sputtered. You ate our food and used my face cream. I cooked, Mona continued, unperturbed. I cleaned. I provided childcare for Leo. In the eyes of the state of Illinois, that constitutes an exchange of services for rent. She looked at me, and a slow, cruel smile spread across her face. I have tenant rights. Becca, you cannot just kick me out. You have to serve me with a formal 30-day eviction notice. And given that I am a vulnerable woman fleeing domestic abuse with no financial means, good luck getting a judge to sign off on that anytime soon. The room spun. I looked at David. He looked shocked, but not at me. He was looking at Mona as if seeing her for the first time. Mona, David said, his voice uncertain. What are you talking about? I am just protecting myself. David, she said, turning her soft gaze back to him. Becca is unstable. Look at her. She is screaming. She is irrational. I cannot just let her throw me out on a whim. I have rights. I realized then that this had been the plan all along. The mail, the help around the house, the delay tactics. She had been building a legal fortress around herself while I was busy trying to be a good sister. She was not leaving. She was digging in. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. The guilt vanished. The fear vanished. In their place, something hard and sharp crystallized in my chest. I looked at my sister. I saw the gleam of triumph in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought she had checkmated me with laws and lies. You want to play by the rules? I whispered. Mona raised an eyebrow. I am just following the law. Becca, fine, I said. I walked to the kitchen and grabbed my car keys. Where are you going? David asked, panic finally entering his voice. I am going to get a lawyer, I said, staring straight at Mona, and then I am going to burn this whole charade to the ground. I walked out the front door. The cool evening air hit my face, drying the tears I refused to shed. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I was done being the victim. I was done being the peacemaker. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady now. I dialed a number I had not called in years. It was a friend from college, a woman named Sarah who worked in criminal law. Sarah, I said when she answered, I need help. I have a squatter, and I think she is wanted for fraud. I hung up and looked back at my house. The lights were warm and inviting, but I knew the rot was inside. Mona thought she was the villain of this story. She thought she was the one who was ruthless, but she had forgotten where we came from. She had forgotten that I grew up in the same trailer park, fought the same demons, and survived the same parents. I had just buried that part of me under layers of suburbia and politeness, but she had dug it up, and now she was going to have to deal with it. I started the engine. The sound was a growl in the quiet night. The war had officially begun. The transformation of my home into a battlefield was complete. The air inside was no longer breathable. It was toxic. Following my declaration of war, The house divided into two armed camps. Mona entrenched herself in Leo's nursery, emerging only to use the bathroom or to raid the kitchen when I was not looking. David retreated to the basement, a ghost haunting the foundations of his own life. And I slept in the guest room, clutching my phone like a talisman, waiting for Sarah to call back. Saturday morning broke gray and miserable. The rain had returned, mirroring the gloom that had settled over Whispering Pines. I woke up with a headache that felt like a nail being driven into my temple. I went downstairs to find the kitchen in disarray. Cupboards were open. Cereal was spilled on the counter. It was a petty act of vandalism. A message from Mona. I am here, and I will make you miserable. But I did not have time to clean. I had a mission. Sarah had called me back late last night. Her advice was clear. If you want her out without a 6-month eviction battle, you need leverage. You need to prove she is a danger or a criminal. I needed Gary. I found his number in an old address book Mona had left behind years ago. I dialed it, my heart hammering against my ribs. It rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. Saoyuting Haling, 2 hash is greater than. Yeah, Gary? I asked. This is Rebecca, Mona's sister. There was a long silence, then a bitter laugh. Mona's sister? What? Did she run out of people to scam, so she sent you? She is at my house. Gary, I said quickly. She said you beat her. She said she had to flee for her life. Beat her? Gary's voice rose, cracking with incredulity. Lady, the only thing I beat was the pavement trying to find her after she cleaned out my bank account. My grip on the phone tightened. Tell me, I whispered. She stole my credit cards. Rebecca maxed them out, $20,000. She bought jewelry, electronics, plane tickets she never used. And the bruise? She got that falling down drunk at a bar the night before she bolted. I have the police report. I have the footage from the bar's security camera the owner gave me. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was exactly what I suspected, but hearing it confirmed was like a physical blow. She was not a victim. She was a predator. Send it to me, I said. Send me everything. The police report number, the footage, everything. I will send it right now. Gary said, and tell your sister if I see her face again. I am not calling the cops. I am calling the hellhounds. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but this time it was with adrenaline. I had the weapon. Now I just needed to aim it. But Mona, sensing the shift in the wind, had prepared her own offensive. I heard a crash from upstairs, a sickening, heavy thud followed by a scream. It was David. I dropped the phone and ran up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. My heart was in my throat. Saoyuting Haoling. Dva, David. I found him in the hallway, outside the nursery door. He was on his knees, clutching his head. There was a vase, a heavy ceramic vase from the hallway table, shattered on the floor next to him. David? I gasped, dropping beside him. What happened? He looked up at me, dazed. A trickle of blood ran down his forehead. Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than she threw it. He stammered. I told her to turn down the music. I opened the door. Saoyuting Haoling, 2 hash is greater than, and she just threw it. I looked at the closed door of the nursery. A cold rage, pure and absolute, flooded my veins. This was assault. This was violence. I stood up and pounded on the door. Open this door. Mona, now, go away. She shrieked from inside. He broke in. He tried to attack me. I was defending myself. The lie came so easily to her lips. It was automatic. I helped David to his feet. He was pale, shaking, the man of logic. The actuary who believed in risk assessment had just been confronted with a chaotic variable he could not calculate. "We are calling the police," I said, reaching for my phone in my pocket. "This ends now. Assault is a crime." "Mona, tenant rights do not cover throwing vases at the landlord." "No." David grabbed my wrist. His grip was weak, but frantic. "No police." "Rebecca, why?" I stared at him. "She cracked your head open. If we call the police, she will tell them I attacked her," David whispered, his eyes wide with fear. "She has the bruises. Rebecca, the old ones. She will say I made them fresh. She will say I tried to force my way into her room. In this state, Xiao Yu Jinghaoling, 2 hash is greater than with a domestic dispute. Xiao Yu Jinghaoling, 2 hash is greater than they will arrest the man first. I could lose my license. I could lose my job." I looked at him, seeing the terror in his eyes. Mona had him checkmated too. She had weaponized the very system designed to protect victims against the people trying to help her. "We cannot just let her get away with this." I hissed. "We have to be smart," David said, wiping the blood from his brow with his sleeve. "We need proof, irrefutable proof." I remembered Gary. I remembered the email that should be hitting my inbox any minute. "I have proof," I said. "I talked to Gary. She stole $20,000 from him. She is wanted for fraud." David's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" "I am positive. And I am going to get the police report." But before we could formulate a plan, the door to the nursery opened. Mona stood there. She was holding a lighter in one hand and a small, stuffed bear in the other. It was Leo's favorite bear, the one he slept with every night, the one he had been crying for since she moved into his room. "You two are so loud," she said, her voice eerily calm. "It is stressing me out." "Mona, put the bear down," I said, my voice trembling. She smiled, flicking the lighter. A small flame danced in the dim hallway. "You know, Becca, stress makes me clumsy. I might drop this. Who knows what might catch fire. This old house, Xiao Yu Jingha Ling, 2 hash is greater than so much wood, so much flammable material." She was threatening arson. She was threatening my child's comfort object. She had crossed the line from manipulative to psychotic. "What do you want?" David asked, his voice hoarse. "I want $5,000. Mona said. "Cash. And a car? You give me that, and I leave. Today, blackmail." I looked at the flame, then at the bear, then at my sister's dead, shark-like eyes. "Okay," I said. "Rebecca." David looked at me. "Okay," I repeated, stepping forward. "I will get you the money. Just give me the bear." Mona laughed. She tossed the bear at me. It hit my chest with a soft thud. I clutched it, smelling the vanilla incense that now saturated its fur. "You have 1 hour," she said, "or I start lighting things that are actually expensive." She slammed the door. The lock clicked. I looked at David. The blood on his forehead was drying into a dark crust. "Get the cash?" he asked, defeated. "No," I whispered, clutching the bear. I checked my phone. The email from Gary had arrived. Attached was a PDF of a police report and a video file. "I am going to the station," I said, but she said, "I do not care what she said. She just threatened to burn our house down. She assaulted you. She is a criminal." I looked at the closed door one last time. "She wants money?" I will give her a cell. I ran down the stairs, the bear still in my hand. The tragedy was not that my sister was a monster. The tragedy was that it took her holding a flame to my son's toy for me to finally stop treating her like family and start treating her like the enemy she was. I drove to the police station in the rain, the windshield wipers slashing back and forth like a metronome counting down the minutes. I was done negotiating with terrorists, even if that terrorist shared my DNA. The drive back from the police station was a blur of wet asphalt and red taillights. The folder sitting on the passenger seat beside me felt heavier than its physical weight. Inside was the death warrant for Mona's residency in my home. A police report from Gary detailing grand larceny, credit card fraud, and identity theft. It was the silver bullet I had been praying for. It was the proof that she was not a victim of domestic violence, but a perpetrator of financial ruin. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. A strange, cold calm had settled over me. It was the calm of a soldier who finally has the coordinates for the airstrike. For weeks, I had been fighting a ghost, a shapeshifter who used my own empathy against me. But ghosts cannot survive the harsh light of criminal records. I pulled into the driveway. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the sky was still a bruised purple. The house looked dark, save for the light in the living room and the faint glow from the upstairs nursery window. My heart gave a painful throb at the sight of that window. My son's room, occupied by a squatter. I grabbed the folder and marched to the front door. I unlocked it and stepped inside. David was pacing in the living room. He looked 10 years older than he had this morning. The bandage on his forehead, where the vase had struck him, was stark white against his gray skin. He looked up as I entered, hope and terror warring in his eyes. "Did you get it?" he whispered, as if she could hear us through the floorboards. I held up the folder. "Everything," I said, my voice low and steady. "The police report, the affidavits, the security footage, stills of her using his card at a liquor store 3 hours after she claimed he was beating her. She is done." David let out a breath that sounded like a sob. He slumped onto the arm of the sofa. "Thank God. So what do we do? Do we call the cops back?" "No," I said, walking toward the stairs. "We give her one chance to leave with dignity. If she refuses, we show her this. We tell her the police are on their way to execute an out-of-state warrant. She will run. She always runs." I walked up the stairs. The wood creaked under my feet. Announcing my arrival, I reached the landing and stood before the nursery door. The vanilla incense was seeping out from underneath, choking the air. I did not knock. I turned the knob. It was locked. "Mona," I called out. "Open the door." Sauiting Harling. Deux dièse est supérieur à silence. "Mona, I have the money." I lead. "Open the door." A moment later, the lock clicked. The door opened a crack. Mona's face appeared, illuminated by the dim light of the lamp she had stolen from our guest room. She looked suspicious, her eyes darting to my hands. "Where is it?" she asked. I pushed the door open, forcing her to step back. I walked into the room. It was a desecration. Clothes were strewn everywhere. Food wrappers littered the floor. The air was thick and stale. David followed me in, standing by the door like a sentinel. Mona crossed her arms, wearing my silk robe again. She looked at empty hands. "I do not see any cash." "Becca, there is no cash," I said. Mona's face hardened. Her lip curled into a sneer. "Then get out. Before I start burning things. I told you. Drop the act." "Mona," I cut her off. "I I threw the folder onto the mattress on the floor. It landed with a heavy slap. "What is this?" she asked, looking down at it. "It is over," I said. "I know about Gary. I know about the credit cards. I know about the $20,000 you stole. I know you were never beaten. I know you are wanted in Ohio for fraud." Mona went still. For a second, the mask slipped. Genuine fear flickered in her eyes. She bent down and flipped open the folder. She stared at the black and white photocopy of the police report. She stared at the still image of herself buying vodka with a stolen card. "We spoke to Gary," David added, his voice gaining strength. "He sent us everything, and we have already contacted the local police. They know you are here." I stepped closer to her. "You have two choices, Mona. You can pack your trash bag and walk out that front door right now and keep running. Or you can stay here and wait for the squad car that is going to be pulling up in 10 minutes to arrest you." I watched her face closely. I expected tears. I expected screaming. I expected her to crumble as she always did when cornered. But Mona did not crumble. She stared at the paper for a long time. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. It was not a happy smile. It was a cold, reptilian baring of teeth. She closed the folder gently. "You really think you are smart, do not you, Becca?" she said softly. "You think a piece of paper from Ohio matters here? It matters to the cops," I said. "You are a criminal, Mona." Mona laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "I am a tenant," she corrected, "and you are harassing me." She walked over to the nightstand, my son's changing table, and picked up her phone. "Go ahead," I challenged her. "Call your lawyer." "Oh wait, you do not have one. You spent all your money on vodka." Mona shook her head, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I am not calling a lawyer, big sister. I am calling someone who will actually listen to me. Someone who cares about the safety of children in this house." My stomach dropped. A cold stone of dread formed in my gut. "What are you talking about?" David asked. Mona tapped the screen. She held the phone up so we could see the numbers she was dialing. 1-800. She looked us dead in the eye as she typed the rest. It was the hotline number for the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. "You would not," I whispered. Mona hit the call button and put the phone on speaker. The ringing sound filled the small room, echoing off the walls of the nursery she had stolen. "Mona, put the phone down," David said, panic rising in his voice. "Shh," Mona hissed, holding a finger to her lips. "It is ringing." I stood frozen. My feet felt like they were nailed to the floor. I wanted to lung at her, to snatch the phone away, to smash it against the wall. But I knew with a terrifying clarity that if I touched her, if I laid a single finger on her while she was on that line, I would be validating whatever lie she was about to tell. A woman's voice answered. "Department of Children and Family Services, Abuse and Neglect Hotline. This call is recorded. How can I help you?" Mona's demeanor changed instantly. Her posture slumped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She let out a sob, a perfect, terrified, heart-wrenching sob. "Hello? Please, help me. I do not know who else to call." "Ma'am, are you safe?" the operator asked. "No." Mona cried into the phone, her eyes locked on mine, glittering with triumph. "I am Saoyuting Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than I am at my sister's house. I have been staying here to help with my nephew. He is 2 years old. His name is Leo." "Okay, take a breath. What is happening with Leo?" Mona looked at David, then at the phone. Sao Jing Halin. 2 is greater than they are hurting him. She whispered, my sister and her husband, I have seen them. They lock him in the basement. They scream at him. I tried to stop them, but the husband, Sao Jing Haling, 2 is greater than he threw a vase at me. He hit me in the face. I gasped. The lie was so monstrous, so inverted, that my brain could barely process it. She was using David's injury, the injury she caused, as proof of his violence. That is a lie. I screamed. She is lying. Mona flinched dramatically, holding the phone away as if scared. You hear that? She is screaming at me right now. Mona cried. They are threatening to throw me out because I said I would report them. They are trying to silence me. Please, you have to come. I am scared for the baby. I am scared for my life. Ma'am, I need you to get to a safe place. Are you in immediate danger? I am locked in the nursery. Mona lied effortlessly. I am barricading the door, but they are outside. They are trying to get in. Please send someone. Send the police. Send a caseworker. You have to save this baby. Mona? Stop, David pleaded, stepping forward. You are destroying our lives. Mona screamed into the phone. He is coming at me. He is coming at me. Then she hung up. The silence that followed was deafening. The room seemed to contract, the walls closing in on us. Mona lowered the phone. The terror vanished from her face. She smoothed her hair back, looking calm, collected, and utterly in control. She looked at the folder on the bed. You have a police report about credit cards? That is cute. Becca. She stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. I could smell the stale alcohol on her breath beneath the mint toothpaste. I just accused you of child abuse, she whispered. In the state of Illinois, that triggers an immediate investigation. If you try to kick me out now, it is retaliation against a whistleblower. It is obstruction of justice. She poked me in the chest with a manicured finger. So, here is how this is going to work. You are going to go downstairs. You are going to cook me dinner. And you are going to wait. Because if I leave this house, if I disappear, Sao Jing Haoling, 2 is greater than who is going to tell the caseworker that it was all a big misunderstanding. She smiled. Only me. Becca, I am the only witness you have. You need me here. You need me happy. Because my word is the only thing standing between you and foster care. I looked at David. He was ashen. He looked like he was going to vomit. We both knew the system. We knew how it worked. An allegation like this, made by a family member claiming to be an eyewitness, was nuclear. It paused everything. It froze our rights. Mona had played her trump card. She had not just checkmated us. She had flipped the board and set the table on fire. Get out of my room, she said, turning her back on us. I need to rest before the police get here. It is going to be a long night. I stood there for a second longer, my hands shaking so hard they hurt. I looked at the folder on the bed. The evidence of her crimes. It was useless now. It was irrelevant. She had raised the stakes from money to flesh and blood. I grabbed David's arm. It was rigid as stone. Come on, I whispered. We walked out of the nursery. We walked out of my son's room. As I closed the door, I heard Mona humming again. It was a lullaby. The same lullaby I used to sing to her when we were children, hiding in the closet while our parents fought. Hush, little baby. Don't say a word. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, Ar Jing Hao Da Yu. I walked down the hallway, my legs feeling like lead. I went into our bedroom where Leo was sleeping in his playpen. I reached down and touched his back, feeling the rise and fall of his tiny rib cage. He was warm. He was safe, for now, but as I heard the distant wail of sirens approaching, not for her, but for us, I realized the nightmare had truly begun. We were not just hostages in our own home anymore. We were suspects, and the monster in the next room held the key to our freedom. I looked at David. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "She won," he whispered. "Not yet," I said, though I did not believe it myself. I walked to the window and watched the flashing blue and red lights turn onto our street. They were coming to save a child, based on the word of a predator. The irony tasted like bile in my throat. I smoothed my shirt. I wiped my face. I prepared to play the role of my life. Not the good sister, not the dental hygienist, but the innocent mother, because if I failed tonight, I would lose everything. The flashing lights were the first thing to shatter the illusion. In Whispering Pines, blue and red strobe lights did not belong. They belonged on the evening news, in gritty crime dramas, or in the neighborhoods I had spent my entire adult life running away from. But here they were, bouncing off the vinyl siding of my Colonial, illuminating the manicured boxwood hedges in a rhythmic, seizure-inducing pulse. I stood by the window, peeking through the slats of the blinds. It was a humiliation so profound, it felt like a physical weight crushing my lungs. The entire neighborhood was out. Mrs. Higgins, the president of the Homeowners Association, was standing on her porch in her bathrobe, clutching her phone. The Millers from across the street were watching from their driveway. I could see the silhouette of Mr. Henderson walking his dog, pausing to stare at the 2 squad cars and the unmarked sedan parked haphazardly in my driveway. I had spent 6 months building a facade of perfection. I baked cookies for the block party. I kept my lawn edges trimmed to the millimeter. I waved. I smiled. I pretended I belonged in this world of easy wealth and stability. In 10 minutes, Mona had burned it all to ash. The pounding on the door was heavy and authoritative. It was not a request. It was a demand. David looked at me. His face was gray, the bandage on his forehead stark and incriminating. He looked like a man who had lost a bar fight, not an actuary who collected vintage stamps. "Do not say a word," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Let me do the talking." I opened the door. 2 uniformed officers stood there, flanking a woman in a beige trench coat. She held a clipboard against her chest like a shield. Her face was tired, sharp, and utterly devoid of warmth. This was the face of the system. "Mrs. Miller?" she asked. "I am Case Worker Jenkins with the Department of Children and Family Services. We received a report regarding the safety of a minor in this residence. May we come in?" I stepped back, feeling the cold night air rush past them into my warm foyer. "It is a misunderstanding," I started, my voice pitching too high. "My sister, she has mental health issues." "She is." "Ma'am, please," Officer Martinez interrupted, stepping into my personal space. "We need to secure the scene." "Where is the child?" "He is sleeping," I cried, moving instinctively to block the stairs. "You cannot go up there. You will wake him up." The officer's hand rested on his belt. His eyes narrowed. To him, I was not a protective mother. I was an obstruction. I was a hysterical woman blocking access to a potential victim. "Step aside." "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Do not make me ask you twice." I moved. I had no choice. The invasion began. They moved through my house with muddy boots, tracking dirt onto the hardwood floors. I kept spotless. They opened doors without asking. They shined flashlights into corners. Miss Jenkins turned to me. I need to speak with the reporting party. Mona? She is in the nursery, David said from the living room. He was sitting on the sofa, flanked by the second officer. I watched as Miss Jenkins climbed the stairs. I felt a surge of nausea. She was going up there to hear the performance of a lifetime. Downstairs, the interrogation began. Mr. Miller, Officer Martinez said, pointing to David's head. How did you get that injury? David touched the bandage. His hand was shaking. My sister-in-law threw a vase at me, he said. Earlier today, she was... Wait, the officer interrupted, scribbling in his notebook. The sister-in-law threw it? The same sister-in-law who called us claiming you were violent? Yes, David insisted. She is the violent one. She is squatting here. We were trying to get her to leave. So you were trying to forcibly remove her? The officer asked, looking up. No, we were... Saoting howling. 2 hash is greater than we were talking. David stammered. The officer looked at me, then back at David. He did not look convinced. He looked at a large man with a head wound and a frantic wife, and he saw a volatile environment. Miss Jenkins came back down the stairs 10 minutes later. Mona was with her. I stared at my sister. She was a vision of frailty. She was wrapped in my duvet, shuffling her feet. Her eyes were red and puffy. She stayed close to the social worker, flinching visibly when she saw David. He is still here? She whispered to Miss Jenkins, her voice trembling just enough to be audible. Miss Jenkins put a protective hand on Mona's back. It is okay. Mona, we are just talking.